This panel will be chaired by Abby Taylor Silva, and Abby is the Vice President of Policy and Communication at the Grower Shipper Association of Central California, which is a 350-member-strong agricultural trade association spanning the coastal region, encompassing Monterey, Santa Cruz, San Benito, and Santa Clara counties. Abby grew up here. She's a native of Monterey and San Benito counties, and her family farmed in Monterey County for over 50 years. She's a graduate of UC Davis and has her BA in political science. She minored in ag and managerial economics, and she's the past president of the Central Coast Ag Task Force, past president of California Women for Agriculture, the Salinas Valley chapter, food safety director to statewide California Women for Ag, and the executive board member for the Salinas Valley Chamber of Commerce. And there's about 12 other things I could list. But thank you so much, Abby, and welcome. And I'll let you introduce the rest of the panel. And I'm going to go hunt for David Zaldowski, who I'm sure is deep in conversation somewhere in the hall. I will go and make him report for duty. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So nice to be here. Thank you for attending our session. So today we're talking about advancing agricultural water solutions. And I just wanted to give you a quick overview from my perspective, getting to work in this realm every day, of what we're looking at when we talk about water in the Salinas Valley specifically. The water that is coming through the Salinas River watershed and that's coming into the Salinas River groundwater basin is the lifeblood of the agricultural community, but also of our community as a whole. And I think it's important to note that there are environmental benefits to our water that are seen through reservoir releases that are looking out for the needs of steelhead. There are people who own land up and down the Salinas River who are voluntarily managing that land in a way that is benefiting flood reduction, which is to the benefit of our communities as a whole, that is benefiting critical habitat for fish and birds and frogs, and that is also recharging our aquifer. And when we talk about recharging our aquifer, that benefits everyone. It doesn't just benefit agriculture, it's benefiting our community of agriculture that's growing over 90% of our nation's artichokes, 88% of the strawberries, over 80% of the leafy greens most of the year, and it's critically acclaimed for its wines, especially Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, which I'm sure we all get to enjoy this weekend. We're doing more than just feeding our nation, though. What we're also doing here in Monterey County specifically is we're acting as the top employer in our county. We are employing more than 53,000 people directly and indirectly supporting industries employing 18,000 more. And all of that is creating $7 billion in economic output for our valley, for our county, and for all of the cities, both in the valley and in the peninsula. As we do all of these things, as we're growing these nutritious crops and feeding our nation, we are managing our resources. And I'm really excited to introduce you to our panel today because you have a lot of innovative thought leaders on this panel who are either assisting growers or they themselves have taken some ideas, big ideas, meaty ideas, but that haven't been put on the ground, and they're putting them on the ground, they're trying them out. And they are leaders among their community in agriculture. So they're going to talk a little bit about what they've done. They're going to talk a little bit about what's on the horizon. And I've asked them all to start off by explaining to us a little bit about how they got there. So I'm going to introduce them all very quickly and then ask them to give us a few minutes on who they are, how they got there, and kind of what their passion is, what they do every day. So we're going to start today with Emily Gardner, and she works as the Water Resource Manager with Driscoll's. She's engaged in community-driven efforts to achieve sustainable groundwater supplies in both the Pajaro and the Salinas groundwater basins. We also have Dr. Michael Kahn, and he is an Irrigation and Water Resource Advisor for the UC Cooperative Extension. He's based in Monterey County. Jocelyn Bridson is the Director of Environmental Science and Resources at Rio Farms, which is a vegetable farming company that's based in King City. It also has growing regions in Oxnard and Yuma. Kurt Golnick is the Chief Operating Officer for Scheid Vineyards. He's worked with Scheid Vineyards since 1988, and he previously served as the Director of the California Association of Wine Grape Growers for 9 years. He's chaired the Community Foundation and many, many, many other local leadership roles. We also have David Zoldowski, and he serves as the director of the Center for Irrigation Technology and the executive director of water initiatives at CSU Fresno. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I think, let's see, the order we wanted, who was our first, who wanted to stand up? Was it Michael or Emily? I think it's Emily. Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Sure. Turn this on. Hello?
Do I need to turn the microphone?
There we go. Let's see.
Probably a button on it, huh? Hey, it's on.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you for the introduction, Abby. Like she mentioned, I'm Emily Gardner, and I work for Driscoll's. And you got a brief introduction to Driscoll's this morning by our CEO, Kevin Murphy. We are a breeder, marketer, and distributor of fresh berries. We're a global company, but we're headquartered here locally out of Watsonville. And I work in our Watsonville office, and I work with growers both there and in Salinas. We have an independent grower model, so we breed the berries and then we contract out with growers to grow those berries. And it enables us to have a lot of interesting relationship with a wide variety of growers with a million great ideas on how to produce berries in the most efficient way possible. As Kevin mentioned, in each of the regions where we grow, water resources is obviously an essential component of our enterprise and something that we like to engage on at a community level in each of these different areas where we're growing and operating. Just a little bit of background about how I got here. There's some slides, there's some pictures. That's me when I'm not 8 months pregnant. I'm from Carmel Valley originally, which is just down the road. My family has a small beef cattle operation, and that experience growing up inspired me to want to work in the space between producers and environmental issues, because I think producers have a long-term vested interest in protecting the resources that their businesses rely on. So I was lucky enough to have a local university, CSU Monterey Bay, where I pursued a master's degree in coastal and watershed science and policy. So I got to study stream flow with Professor Doug Smith. I took a whole class on the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, and I got some fundamentals in groundwater hydrology, which set me up pretty well for an internship with the Resource Conservation District of Santa Cruz, which then Driscoll's does a lot of work with local resource conservation districts, and so that led me to my job at Driscoll's, where I've been for about 5 years now. And that picture on the right is a workshop, an irrigation workshop that we host for our growers, and working with our growers continues to be one of my favorite parts of the job. Next slide. Here you go. Oh, that's it. So I really appreciate the focus of this day and this panel to be oriented to success, because I think myself as well as my colleagues and coworkers are often very quick to point out how much work we still have left to do. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but it's really neat to pause for a minute and think about successful collaborations that we have gotten off the ground, and it's an honor to be here to share those with you today. So I wanted to touch on two examples on that. The graph on the left there is about irrigation use relative to crop demand. And so when I first joined Driscoll's, we started asking growers to share their water use data with us. We wanted to know what our water footprint in the region was, as well as to engage with growers about what their water use efficiency was. But in order to really have a robust conversation about that, we wanted to know, okay, well, how do we think about water use relative to what that crop on that particular piece of ground, really is demanding for the season? And in order to really have that kind of information, you need some really in-depth, robust research about that. And I was lucky enough to partner with Michael Kahn, and he's going to go much more in depth on this topic. But he has a model which uses, canopy, local environmental factors, rooting depth, soil type, and a lot of other different variables to predict what the crop demand is, particularly in our case for strawberries. So we were able to use that tool, and in this case generate that kind of data on the left there, which shows how much the grower used in blue relative to the crop evapotranspiration rate in green. And it shows that they were using maybe a little bit more than what the crop evapotranspiration rate was in the beginning of the season and a little bit less towards the end of the season. But at the end of the day, it enables us to have a really robust, data-driven conversation about the crop demand on a field, which is really essential as a foundation for all of the different factors that can ultimately influence crop performance. And then on the right, we've touched a bit about this today so far. Another success from my perspective is around community collaboration. The Pajaro Valley, there's the Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency in place. It was written into the legislation with SGMA. They have a groundwater management plan in place with a wide variety of conservation goals. Along with that, there's been a really robust community water dialogue around water conservation that both academics, agriculture, landowner, governmental representatives, as well as nonprofits are engaging in to think about both strategies to support the basin management plan, as well as kind of some out-of-the-box thinking that was mentioned earlier, like, what can groundwater recharge look like on individual farms, and what are some other just creative practices that we can implement to reach our conservation goals in a critically overdrafted basin like Pajaro. So I snapped that photo, the front of the room, and I didn't get anybody's permission to show it here today, so some of you are out there, so thank you for that, and looking forward to some questions. Thanks. Michael?
Well, also, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation to participate on this panel. I'm, as Abby said, a farm advisor who specializes in irrigation and water resource management for the University of California. And I'm part of the cooperative extension system, which is quite unique in the United States because there's about 200 of us out in the counties doing research and partnering with grower groups, whoever we can partner with to move us forward as far as applying science and research to managing our resources better. And I started in 2001 on the Central Coast. I had previously been a farm advisor up in the Sacramento Valley and had the opportunity to move to this beautiful area, which I've been grateful for this opportunity. And I got to my job and there was one broken or two broken flow meters, and they said, okay, work with growers and help improve water management. So over the years, we've built up a nice research and extension program based out of Salinas, but I work up and down the coast, really, all the way sometimes down in Oxnard, partnering with people down there. But most of my work is in the Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito counties here. So my first real objective is to help growers use water to optimize their production. But the other aspect is to make sure their water use doesn't have environmental impacts, both in quality and quantity, because if we overpump our aquifers, we aggravate problems with seawater intrusion. And this scene, with runoff coming off fields, used to be very, very common when I first got here. I feel like growers have made a lot of progress in minimizing the amount of runoff that comes off their fields, or at least coming off their ranches. We still have challenges. We have areas that are tile drained because there's high water tables, and so the nutrients that end up in that tile drained water, particularly nitrate, causes spur of algae growth in a lot of our sloughs and cause low oxygen conditions during the the nighttime. So we definitely still have challenges in that area. And growers have challenges. Not all the groundwater is the same throughout the valley. Some of it is fairly saline, and the salinity isn't the same. You know, sometimes we're very high in carbonates and sulfates, more chlorides, and so to understand, you know, how to use that water and make the best use of it for a particular water quality is also a challenge. There's not a lot of new research going on salinity management, especially for the commodities that we grow in this region. And so, you know, I'm probably one of the few people that has the opportunity to spend my time researching these type of issues. In the wintertime, we have these big storm events, and we probably will have more storm events where we get tremendous amounts of runoff. And so we do have a challenge to take that runoff that comes off the ag fields and get it to infiltrate into the aquifer. That can help, of course, with salt management, but it also, you know, helps recharge the aquifer. And drip irrigation is just growing, you know, in this valley. As we find new crops, we can use it, and new ways of using drip irrigation, but there's continued challenges in making it economical for growers. Emily was talking about how we're making use of weather-based information to make decisions on how much is the proper amount of water applied, so we don't over-apply water, and also we don't leach the nitrogen that's already in the soil. So we've developed over time, partnering with growers and different shippers, a tool that's online, Crop Manage, that's what it's called, and it's allowing growers to use it on all these different commodities to make water management decisions as well as nitrogen management decisions. And, you know, one of the solutions that we've found that's starting to take off now is using this soil nitrate quick test, so growers can figure out if they have sufficient amount of nitrogen in their soils. They don't fertilize when it's not necessary. And another solution, been harder to implement, is we call low biomass cover crops, where instead of leaving ag fields bare in the wintertime, we do plant some cover crops in the furrows and then kill it at a certain stage, so we have basically enough cover to help infiltrate water. And we found that can improve infiltration by 50 to 70%. And a big part of what I do is training, and it's been a learning experience of how do you train people actually managing the water, and that's the irrigators. And many of them don't have a lot of education, but they're intelligent people. And we found that you know, you do these presentations in Spanish, you make it very hands-on, you give opportunities for them to ask questions and give their opinions, and we slowly make changes over time. And so I'm always balancing, you know, doing training as well as research. So I think that gives you a little bit of an introduction of, you know, what my career is about.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jocelyn.
That's not me?
That's not you. Let's see. Me.
Oh, there we are.
Oh.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, boy, there's a big picture of me. I'll just forward the slide. Is it this one?
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Should work.
I'd rather have a picture of a farm field. Okay. The big one? Yeah. Oh, there we go. The cabbage. I've been outdone by cabbage. Okay. Hi, my name's Jocelyn Bridson. I'm the Director of Environmental Science and Resources at Rio Farms, a vegetable company based in King City with additional growing regions in Oxnard, California, as well as Yuma, Arizona. First, on how I got to this point, I started out, you might call me an environmentalist. That's a four-letter word in a lot of farming communities, but it really just stemmed from an appreciation for the natural environment, lots of times outdoors as a child. So I studied conservation, biology, as well as environmental studies back in Wisconsin, where I grew up, and worked for about 10 years in conservation, restoring tallgrass prairies, wetland ecosystems in the San Francisco Bay, and doing a lot of education. So education in Yosemite, for the Forest Service in Alaska, and so a variety of experiences. And then I went back to grad school. I was interested in not just playing outdoors and not just enjoying time in nature with other people and sharing that, but trying to solve some problems. And that's why I got a master's of environmental science and management, focused on water resource management. So it's an honor to speak here with so many really dignitaries and visionaries, both globally and locally. And I was very fortunate in graduate school. It's a solutions-based school, and they have projects from the community. And actually in the audience is Nikki Rodoni. She started the sustainability program at Gills Onions, had a successful program project with the previous class, and then she wanted to expand the sustainable agriculture program for Rio Farm. So she helped start that, and I was very fortunate to pretty much jump into agriculture 100%. And I fell in love with it. Obviously, we all need food. Who here ate lunch today? Okay. I love vegetable agriculture. It's the healthiest for us as people. It's also the healthiest for the planet as far as greenhouse gas emissions and whatnot. I still get to be outdoors and get dirty, and I still get to use science, but instead of the science sitting on a shelf, I can use that day or that week to turn around and make decisions that have a real impact. So I'm very happy to be part of agriculture and the solutions. My role is I examine our resource use to try to find efficiencies in water, fertilizer, energy, those types of topics, managing data collection, and really doing a lot of staff education. So not just learning from my own personal knowledge, but spreading it out to our staff, our ranch managers, everybody on the team. So I will give 3 examples today of some of the solutions that we found. This first one's a lovely graph. If you're a scientist, you like graphs. This is a graph from our soil moisture monitoring, just from one field of cauliflower that we had out this year. The plant date was early May. We got the sensor installed a few weeks later, and you can see, so that just to pretend there's a plant on top and then the roots are going down. So the blue line is 4 inches, and then it goes 8, 12, 16, 20, and 24. So we can see all the way down to 24 inches and how the soil moisture is changing throughout time. So it's from May until early July. And so we see a lot of fluctuation. What does this graph tell us? We can see the moisture going up when we have an irrigation and going down with that root uptake. It tells us, for example, our roots are working at 4 and 8 inches in that first month, which is what we expect after you plant it. It takes another 6 to 8 weeks to get it down, to get those roots sucking up that moisture at the 20 and 24 inch level. So that's one piece of information that it can tell us. It also tells us that we've got we see little fluctuation in the 20 and 24 inch moisture. That's telling me that we're not necessarily over irrigating. If we would see that spike happening at those levels at the beginning of the season, we would be a little bit concerned, hey, we're over irrigating, we're getting too much water down to that deeper level. I can't promise you that every single graph I have at the office is perfect, but what this is, it's a data piece, and it tells us what's happening at this site, at this particular spot in this field, and how can we have a conversation about that with our team. This is just another view of it, so I kind of like this view. It's a little bit easier to digest. Red is very dry, and blue is wet. So you can see at the beginning and throughout the season, the top 16 inches are pretty dry, and we're letting it dry down to very low soil moisture, and then near the end of the season, we're seeing that root uptake in those lower depth profiles. So it's kind of it's a nice way to see what's happening under the surface of the soil without having to dig in there every week and figure it out. Oh, oops, let me go back. The other thing on these probes is they also have an EC reading, and so we can see the electrical conductivity or the summation of all of the salts in the soil. And taking, I think, some of Michael Kahn's work, perhaps, it's pretty small font, but the EC of your water, of course, if you have very salty water, it's going to affect your yield. And so for cauliflower, if you want 100% of a normal yield, you want your EC to be about 1.9. If you want, well, you never want 75%, but if you have an EC of your water of a little bit higher, I've marked that in the red sort of parameters there, but it kind of shows you at what depths did the EC get. Is it below that level or is it within a reasonable level? I'm going to say here we didn't have a huge crop loss, but this is an example of how you can use this data to help you understand, okay, why did we have a yield loss? Was it the salts in the water, in the soil? Another example is a application. We're working with a company out of San Francisco called Wexus, which it refers to the water energy nexus. About 20% of California's electricity is used to move water to various users, and excuse me. So this helps show us our water consumption. We can compare month to month, year to year. The different blue colors there, actually, what water did we purchase at peak rates from PG&E, off-peak, and then partial peak. So it's kind of a neat snapshot. You'll also see electric consumption. So again, water and energy. So what did we consume pumping that water out of the ground from PG&E? And you'll see it went negative in the winter. That was due to our solar array that we have. So we actually used less energy than we needed in those months, and we got credit for that during the summer. And then we can also find out what we spent. If anybody's sifted through PG&E bills, especially if you're a farmer with 50 wells, you know that it's a pain, so something like this is actually quite useful. And then the old, I know that the title of this is New Frontiers, and compost is not exactly a new frontier, but I want to put in a plug for it. We generate about 4 million tons. We create 4 million tons, not tons, pounds, 2,000 tons of compost per year. It started out as a waste problem. We had excess culled onions that didn't meet market standards. We now also have leafy green waste. We combine that with other waste that we can find locally, and tons of benefits. I won't list them all here. They're up on the screen, but water-related benefits up on top. Compost can actually sometimes hold up to 30% more water if in compost amended soils. So it changes the soil structure. It makes it soak up more water and retain that water in the root zone, and it kind of tricks the soil into becoming more like a loam soil that can really retain more water. So I just wanted to put a plug out for the old-fashioned technology of compost, which could actually be more effective and perhaps more efficient than some of the newfangled things out there. And that's all.
As we pass the clicker down to Kurt, I just wanted to remind everyone, especially if you've been here all day, you've been doing this, but you have pieces of paper, pads at your table, and if you have questions, please feel free to write them down, and Lisa and others will come around and pick those up.
Good afternoon. My name is Kurt Golnick again, and Chief Operating Officer of Scheid Vineyards, and been farming in the Salinas Valley, farming wine grapes in the Salinas Valley for 30 years. And I just got a note here. Kurt, apologies, just received your email, wasn't able to update your slide. So I went ahead and updated my slides right here, if you don't mind holding this up. No, I have some old slides. I'll just use those. It's my bad for being slow on the draw here. So I think the place to start for me, at least, is what we have a core value as a company, Scheid Vineyards, and that is sustainability, sustainable farming practices, sustainable employment or employees, and environment. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that because it all connects to water. So from an environmental impact point of view, erosion to me is the number one bad thing if you're a farmer. And we're talking about water conservation, but frankly, in my opinion, the number one responsibility of farming is to completely and utterly mitigate erosion. It's soil that we grow everything on, and that's really, really critical. And so we put that as a high priority, and of course if you're managing erosion, you're also managing runoff and water. So we plant cover crops on 100% of our acres when we're farming 4,300 acres to give you a feel for our footprint. And then that aids in percolation, and then we also have holding ponds, so if we're inundated, and we are inundated primarily. Is the Monterey County here, by the way? I'd love to talk to them because our inundation comes from their roads. So we capture runoff from Metz Road and so on and so forth, many roads, and drop it into perk ponds, and then I think we do a great job of holding virtually all of the water, stormwater, rainwater, on our properties. And we work really hard to do that. That's important to us. It's a source, again, of percolation for the groundwater, but it's also important for us not to have any erosion whatsoever. Part of the environmental sustainability initiative that we have is using soft chemicals, too, so we're really good about IPM, which is integrated pest management, and things along those lines to reduce the application of pesticides and also use beneficial insects to kill the enemy. I want to speak a little bit real quick about our employees. It's a real priority of ours for social equity, and I'm talking about the fair wages that we pay, health insurance that we've provided since the very beginning, since long before Obama was even probably born, the retirement benefits, vacation benefits, and most importantly, the respect that we show our people. That, to me, is the number one responsibility of a good employer. And lastly, economics. I mean, we are a successful business, and we're constantly innovating to maintain profitability, and that is really challenging. But we continue to try to deliver value to the marketplace and improve our efficiencies, which is a part of what we're going to be talking about here today, because water efficiency is a real core requirement to manage your costs. Water is very expensive, not something that you want to waste. So we've been innovative with water for many, many years. The first technology that we used for innovating was actually neutron probes, which, by the way, is still a great technology. We still use a lot of neutron probe sites. And so what we do is we dig a hole in the ground about so big around, 2.5 inches or something like that, drop a PVC pipe down, and from 1 foot to 5 feet, in some cases deeper, we, on a weekly basis during the irrigation season, we're actually measuring the amount of water that's in the soil. Then we're going to grapevines. We have a permanent crop that gives us an advantage. So we go to the grapevines and we actually measure the vascular pressure, or the amount of energy a vine needs to use to extract water. We compare those two things, and we have a very good idea how effective our irrigations are and how the amount of water we have in the soil is affecting the vine, and we can manage our irrigations that way. If you're a grape grower, you know also that you want to stress grapevines at exactly the right time. So we have to use those tools to maximize the quality of our grapes. So we transitioned from neutron probes to a different type of probe that just measures electrical resistance in the soil. That's an automated system. So it's starting to get really sexy here, because we were using furrow irrigation, talk about using a lot of water, and we were using sprinklers, and then we converted everything over to drip, neutron probe, using this other way of analyzing soil moisture, driving towards complete and utter automation. So when I say that, trying to move the decision to irrigate away from the timing of humans into the hands of computers. And we have made a lot of progress in that regard, although we don't completely trust it yet. We're getting very, very close. And so what I mean to say there is we're doing such a great job of monitoring soil moisture and such a great job of understanding the needs of the vine and relating that to weather, et cetera, many other factors. And then we have variable frequency drive pumps that can push water at precisely the right pressure. So we actually have soil moisture monitors that are pinging the pump and saying, the vine is saying, I'm thirsty, turn on. The pump is turning on. It's pressurizing just the number of valve sets that are required to irrigate the thirsty grapevines, and it's running the amount of water that's needed, and we can watch the water move through the profile live. It is really cool, really fun to do. So we have a lot of great tools that we're getting better and better at, and those tools are being used not for just for water conservation, but for also for quality management as well, which in our industry, water timing is a big deal. Talk a little bit about our winery, because that is also participating in water conservation. So our winery, we process about 30,000 tons. This year it looks like it's about 35,000 tons. Looks like the crop is pretty good. which is nice. So to give you an idea what 30,000 tons is, that's like 2 million cases. So 2 million cases, that's like a bottle of wine for everybody in California. I think that's pretty cool. All right, so grab a bottle when you go home. But we also are using about 15 or 16 million gallons of water to process at the winery. 100% of that water is captured. As a matter of fact, 100% of the water on the hard surfaces, roofs, concrete, asphalt, 100% of that water is captured, pumped into processing ponds where we reduce the solids through a 3-pond system, and then we use that last pond, that cleaner water in the last pond. We actually blend it with some well water, and we irrigate our vineyards with it. Not one drop of water leaves the property from rain or from washdown or whatever. It's all bioremediated and reapplied to the vineyards. And then, you know, when you crush grapes, you guys from the 70s might remember no stems, no seeds. So we pull out all the stems and all the seeds, and the skins too. And so I think composting is sexy. And I like composting. So we compost 5,000 tons, all right? And we add manure to it and straw to give it some body, cook it to about 160 degrees Fahrenheit, spread it in our vineyards for nutrition, water conservation, okay? So I like compost. I think it's modern and cool, and we're going to do more of it. Lastly, I didn't burn through these slides, did I? Lastly,
I don't think you need
I'm
it.
full of it, that's why. That's where our properties are. How do I go backwards here? So we're all over the Salinas Valley, about 75 miles from one end to the other, so a bunch of land. And that just is what I just said. And that right there is the newest player in the party. So we're generating 100% of our energy needs now through this wind turbine, which is generating 186 kilowatts of energy, so enough to satisfy all of our needs at the winery, bottling operations, and so on and so forth. So last thing I'll say is we have 300 full-time employees. That's our FTE. So we're doing good things for the county. Thank you.
All right, and finally, David.
Okay, so I guess I'm the closer here. Whoops, sorry. So yeah, I guess I'm the closer here. So I'm gonna, I don't know if I advance the slides here, or are we gonna?
I think they'll pop up for you.
There we go. There we go. So I'm going to talk. We heard a lot about Sigma and water shares, all kinds of. But underlying all that's data, right? If you don't have the data, you can't do any of these deals. It just doesn't work. So I want to talk a little about that. So my comments are about what are the drivers for on-farm data collection, and I think there's 3 buckets. So I'm going to talk to you about those buckets. So the first one is the obvious one: on-farm increased production, optimizing water energy use, and also underlying a lot of this. You know, there's a big labor concern out there, labor shortage. So anything we can do to reduce labor, people turning valves in the middle of the night, other things that can be automated. Those are all good things, because then that labor can, since it's short, can be used for more productive things that can't be automated easily. And so we go forward with that. And so what are the things we're trying to measure on the farm? We heard some of those going on, and I totally agree with that. But real-time pump tests. So we want to know, so a lot of growers, I won't speak for any of those over on this side. I'm from the Big Valley over the hill there. But we see a lot of growers that run to failure. They are pump starts, and everything's good as long as there's water coming out until it stops, right? And then it's hit the panic button and get the pump guy out there. So if we have a real-time pump test, what I mean by that is we're measuring the drawdown, the flow rate, the pressure, the vibration on the motor, and the kilowatts coming in. And as we start to see things change, that tells us there's something we need to look at. It might be as simple as a plug filter. It might be as bad as the impellers filled with sand and wearing out. All kinds of things can be going on. But running to failure should not be an option for growers, but too many of them do that. We heard about the plant, soil, and remote sensing, getting data back, going back to your pump to turn it on when we need water. Distribution uniformity. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So kind of the 3 big ideas we think in efficient irrigation is, one, having a pumping plant that's run efficiently. We have a program that we've run for about 15 years and have done about 30,000 pump tests through PG&E, Southern Cal Edison, and other folks. And we know there's a lot of ag pumps out there that are running 30, 40% efficient. And again, as long as there's water coming out, they think things are okay. But that really does affect the distribution if you don't have the pressure and flow out there. And they should be up around 60, 65. And so that's another sweet spot we ought to be at. Knowing when and how much to put on, right? We see all kinds of interesting. I was looking at a big West Side farmer. I won't mention their name, and I was looking at their irrigation schedule this summer, and they were running, I think, 160 hours on one set a week. I think there's only 168 hours. I have to add it up. And you kind of wonder what's going on out there. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons why that's just a bad idea. Yet these are, relatively successful farmers, and they're making money, but we think there's better ways to do that. Demand response, right? So the energy companies are now saying, hey, look, if we're going to have blackouts or brownouts, we're going to shoot you a message and you need to go down for an hour, that kind of stuff. So part of what we saw earlier, some of the soil moisture and stuff, knowing that you've got enough water in the bank to take a shutdown and sort of having those analytics in your forward thinking and your prediction models. And I think, the energy companies, they can look and kind of tell you when things are going to get ugly, and so you could put that into your irrigation scheduling as well, so that when the shutdowns come, that you're prepared for it and you're not going to take away from induce any crop stress that you're not trying to. I know in grapes they try to put grape stress in there on occasion for good reasons. You don't want to put it in there for all the wrong reasons. Interesting, we talk about over-irrigation a lot, water moving below the root zone, and then the embedded energy in that. It turns out that when that's got fertilizer in it, maybe the embedded energy is like 10 times. I mean, I'm not even talking about the degradation to the water quality in the groundwater. I'm just talking about the energy loss. So there's a very high energy component to that. So that needs to be recognized and help manage. And then this is where I really think that the future of irrigated ag is about data collection and reporting, and we'll talk a little more about that. But you can't manage the system if you don't have data. You can't. You're flying blind. Okay, so the regulatory piece. So we've heard about SGMA. We know about the nitrate task force, nitrates in the groundwater. And there's a whole slew of other challenges out there. But again, you're not going to be able to do much with that if you don't have data. You don't know where water is in the root zone. You don't know how much nitrogen's in the root zone, right? So one of the holy grails is if we could measure nitrogen at the top of the root zone, at the bottom of the root zone, and in some parts of the state here, we need to put a little more water on than the plant needs. Why is that? We got salts. Got to move them past the root zone. But it'd be really nice if that water moving past the root zone didn't really have any nitrogen in it, or very, very little, at least less than the background stuff, right? So that whatever water we're adding down there is actually reducing the nitrate concentration rather than increasing it. And so these are some of the things, groundwater withdrawals, SGMA's going to, I think, require that. Yet to be determined, but I'm pretty sure that you're going to have to know what you're taking out and what you're using. Know where the water and the fertilizer movement is. We need to know all the water stays on the farm. When water runs off the farm, people get excited about that. And then the overall water quality considerations, and that might be the water coming in, and you might have to blend it. You might have multiple wells. I was talking to one grower has 45 wells. Some of those have TDS up to 2,500, which for those who don't know, that's really hard on plants. They don't like that. And then there's a number of other considerations that need to be looked at. And then the last one, I don't think this one gets talked about enough, and so I'm just going to throw it out there. And this actually might be the driver that tips the cart over for everybody. The supply chain, I don't think we're very far away from some big Walmart or Save Mart or one of the marts to look at us and say, I'm buying almonds from you or a bottle of wine or whatever it is. We want you to certify that you're a good steward of that water and energy. And we already know that in the EU for pistachios, they're requiring a carbon footprint. And interesting enough, they're only doing it on the sprayers and how much tractor time's in the field. They haven't got to the water and energy part. And the reason I don't think they're doing it, because we don't have the data to report it if they ask for it. We'd have to make it up. But I don't think we're very far from the day when you're in there and you're going to have, everything else in this world's turning green. To know that pound of almonds has been grown in a responsible way for water and energy use. And so, again, I think the data is going to drive that. And there was back over 20 years ago, there was a cotton farm in Australia that was the first one to get ISO certified, okay? And what that meant was that everything on that farm was traceable. Even the oil change of this pickup truck, they knew that it was disposed of properly. And at the end of the day, they asked the grower, they said, how's this certification helped you? Did you get more money for your cotton or anything like that? He says, no, we've identified some improvements on how we're going to farm and stuff, but the real benefit is that we sell our cotton to the mills in Japan, and we're first on the list to sell. So they never have to worry about a market for their cotton because they're ISO certified. So there will be some benefits, I think, maybe not on price, and I know we get squeezed on that, but if you always have a guaranteed market, that really helps with your banker. He's going to be a lot happier than with you. And this is my last slide, and this is back to, and we can do the irrigation scheduling, and this is my one of my favorite slides. I get in from a room like this full of growers, and I'll say, okay, who has drip? And they'll all raise their hand. Whose uniformity is 85 or 90 above? And every single grower will raise his hand, right? And that was probably true when they put the system in, but this is a bell-shaped curve, right? And that really means that the green guys on the right, those are the ones that are 85 and 90. And so either I have an exceptional group in this room that keeps their system uniform and clean and all that kind of stuff, or somebody's lying, and really they're not lying, they just don't know that systems degrade over time, and you end up in the yellow and the red. And what I tell people, you can do all the soil moisture sensors, you can do all the management, but if you're managing a bad system, all you're doing is managing a bad system well. So this is an area that I think is terribly overlooked in the drip micro market. And above that's a friend of mine farms 1,000-acre pistachios, a very good grower. And he sends guys out every day to make sure, on the quads, make sure the little spinners are spinning. And what they would do when they were stopped is they would take them apart. They're plugged, right? And they'd put them back together. But and he's an agronomist. I'm not going to pick on him for being that, but he's not an engineer. And inside those little micro sprinklers is a little disc. And that disc is the compensating piece that keeps the pressure from getting too high and the water getting too high. And so all those containers that show twice as much water is because when they opened it, the little disc flew off into the grass. They never saw it. They put it back together. It's spinning. The water's running. They've done their job. And he was as shocked as anybody when I showed him this little diagram. I said, they're not all giving you 9.6 gallons an hour. So with that, I'll end my comments. But it's about the total, sort of gestalt of running the system here. You need to have everything working in order to do it right.
So can you tell why I love my job? Because I love all this stuff. It's so fascinating, and it's wonderful to have you all here in one place. So I'm going to ask a favor of my friend Lisa. We have a lot of questions. Not everybody on our panel is going to feel comfortable or necessarily want to answer every question. So if you don't worry about it. Not everybody needs to. I want to keep all answers to a minute so we can get through as much as possible. So if you wouldn't mind keeping track of that for me, that would be great. So I have a few, and I know through the crowd we might have a few. But the first that I'm going to ask is actually directed straight at Michael. So you're welcome, Michael. Why has the implementation of cover crops been difficult?
That's a very good question. In the Central Valley, not the Central Valley, in the Salinas Valley, we grow a lot of vegetable crops, and we pretty much are growing all year round. So you don't make a lot of money for growing a cover crop, and so it's hard to fit those in. But there are fields that we do have fallow, and there's potential if we could find cover crop solutions that don't interfere with the spring planting. But there's a huge risk that once you put a cover crop out there, that you won't be able to do your normal spring tillage and plant on time. And if you get off with your schedule, that is a big problem. So it's a big challenge. And that's why we've looked at these low biomass cover crops. But like anything, you've got to figure it out for your ranch and your soil type. And although we do our research and we show, this has a lot of potential, it's a big challenge for growers to invest the time and really try this out, on their farms.
And there's the hook. Okay, perfect timing. Thank you.
Yeah.
My next question, and any of you who'd like to respond, please do. What emerging technologies or approaches for on-farm water management seem most promising to you? Of all you're working on, what's the most promising? And we'll take a few answers on this.
So I'll start. So I'm at Fresno State, and we have an incubator and an accelerator, and so we get lots of bright people with great ideas. And Some of those work, some of those don't. But there's one right now we're working with that they've got a radar-based remote sensing that they think they can measure water down in 6-inch increments down to 4 feet. And so from the surface, yeah. And so my hope is that we can fly these fields and do DUs and know where the dry spots are, and in fact where the wet spots are, where maybe a rabbit's chewed on or a coyote or somebody's done something. And I see that as a huge benefit in water use efficiency if we can maintain high use distribution. And so so we're supposed to get a prototype in Q4, Q1 coming up to take a look over. Fresno State has a 1,000-acre farm there, so we're going to take a look at it, see if it really works.
You know, I would just add that if you don't have to have probes in the soil, that's really a great thing. The promising technology for grapes right now is related to drones, probably, because it's too expensive to fly with airplanes over the top of your vineyards. And then use infrared technology to see, if you will, the stress footprint of the vineyards, and then get that information back immediately. That's showing some promise right now. You know, one of the big challenges, though, and maybe you're going to speak to this some of this more, but we are already generating mountains of data with the technology that we have, and I'm a little frustrated even today with our vineyard managers because I don't think we're leveraging the information we currently have well enough. And it's like, how do I get them to read this stuff? You know, so I think there's just a lot of I guess. We just have to get a lot better at digesting all of the information that we're generating right now, because I think we can get a lot better at what we currently already have in place. But again, I think that drones and infrared technology is showing a lot of promise.
Just one more comment. I think groundwater recharge is a really good solution. Our best reservoirs for water are in the ground, and our Salinas Valley is very fortunate. We've got a really good recharge rate. The groundwater isn't as deep as it is in the Central Valley, so we're able to actually replenish it. And of course, there are challenges, food safety. If you intentionally flood a farm field, you have to wait sometimes 60 days or more under LGMA standards, unless if you do extensive soil testing. So there are limitations, but there are some growers, Terra Nova Farms in the Central Valley, Don Cameron, he's worked for many years getting all the permits to be allowed to do that on his land, but he successfully this year had enough rainwater coming down the local river in excess to put that into his groundwater and serve himself and his neighbors there. So I think groundwater recharge is a good solution generally for the state of California.
And I'll just add a little something. While I'm also excited about remote sensing, the sheer variety of irrigation management tools that are available right now to our growers is really exciting. I think, you know, they have so many choices and so many different tools are on offer with different bells and whistles, different ways they process and show data that it's really down to a personal preference, and there are starting to be more and more kind of cost-effective solutions and different options for growers to use, which I think is really exciting.
So we've touched a little bit on Sigma in the presentations, and I wanted to throw out, you talked about drip irrigation, Michael, and I think in the, in the early 90s, we were using drip on, somewhere in the teens, in the percentage of acreage, and now we're at about 70% in Monterey County. Drip irrigation is not a panacea for every crop, of course, and it is expensive, especially if you're a medium to small size grower, but we've seen a lot of growers over the past few decades bring it on. Sigma is looking at water sustainability for the long term. And there are many of us on this panel who've been talking about Sigma and working on Sigma for the past couple of years. It presents a number of opportunities and challenges. What of these stand out to any of you? What opportunities do you really see coming from Sigma? What are the biggest challenges? And since it's such an easy question, Sigma, for those in the audience who might not know, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And it's a law that passed at the end of 2014, 3 bills that became one law. And it requires areas of high priority to put together a plan to deal with overdraft of groundwater aquifers over about 20 years.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is just getting all of the different and diverse parties to the table and getting some agreements out and by 2020, which is just around the corner. Obviously, environmental needs, communities that are disadvantaged, farming use, industrial use, city use. So I think getting everybody to the table, and SGMA involves not just over-extraction of groundwater, not just saltwater intrusion, but there's also a bullet point in there about water quality as well. So balancing all of the needs and desires and the science and then the passion of people's livelihoods as well. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. I think one of the benefits might be savings, so cost savings. Hopefully, if we do look at reducing our water use, we'll be reducing our pumping costs. Perhaps we'll get some bulk discounts if we need to buy, advanced telemetry, water meters. If we need to install those in the county, maybe we'll find ways to get bulk discounts where growers can work together and collectively get some of these new technologies at a lower cost.
Kurt?
Hey, I'm going to jump in on SGMA. So I think, low-hanging fruit there, conservation. I mean, we're trying to balance the basin. I think the basin balance, I think, if you remind me here, is the 2015 measurement. And I think through conservation, so conservation is not just water conservation, it could be plant breeding as well. So you have plants in the future that don't require as much water. So you'll have those sciences, I think, working in tandem into the future. I think it's an issue of distribution too, and so maybe that is social equity, a part of that, and maybe it's just growers just getting along better and sharing a little bit of the resource better. And then I think storage is a big thing. So just capturing the water to begin with. We have a tunnel project that we're talking about between Nacimiento and San Antonio. I think this last year, if I remember the statistics properly, if they would have just done everything exactly right, I think it might have captured another 190,000 acre feet, which is a lot of water. And then there's ground storage, and you hear this said all the time by Aggies, and that is above ground storage is simple an idea as it seems, is actually not a terribly efficient thing to do because evaporation rates are really high. Above ground storage, lakes and reservoirs, they burn through a lot of water. So if you understand your underground aquifer well enough and you trust it, send the water down there. That's the first place that it ought to go. So I think those things, actually we do those things well, we're probably there. We're probably home free.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right. I have a few questions for specific people. Also, we are live streaming, so I was asked to give a quick shout out to CSUMB and Hartnell. Hello.
Hello.
We're so happy to have you there. So a question or two for Kurt. How many acres of wine grapes are in the Salinas Valley? Is there room for more? That's part of the question.
Well, we think there's 45,000 acres. Growers are notorious about not reporting every acre. It's probably in every crop, right? So about 45,000 acres. That is about the same amount of acreage that Napa has. And is there room for more? In my opinion, no. Not one more vine. But honestly, there is so much marginal ground in Monterey County that you really should be putting grapes on. I see some of these crops are struggling out there. I look at that marginal ground and I go, whoo, that's beautiful for grapes. So you got lousy ground, give me a call, as long as it has water. Really 100,000 or more acres probably of marginal ground in the county. So, but don't plant it. We don't need those grapes.
For Emily, there's a question about strawberries and how the industry is managing water runoff and erosion, especially during storm events, especially with plastic-covered beds.
Yeah, it's definitely, when you add an impervious surface to the soil, you're going to have a different rainfall runoff ratio. And, our industry is very aware of that. And we've had the opportunity to do some interesting collaborations with Eric Brennan, blank on his name, here in Salinas, doing, Michael touched on it a little bit, in furrow cover crop planting in strawberry fields, really focusing on the end of the beds, especially if there's any slopes trying to slow down that water by capturing it and slowing it in the uncovered furrows in the strawberry fields. Again, it's a management issue that we're still learning about. You know, if you plant a mustard crop in your strawberry field, then at some point you're going to have to go and kill it so that your pickers can get, you know, into the field. And so if as everybody kind of returns to their fields in March, it's a problem if you have mustard covering all your berries. So it's definitely still a new practice, but one that we're exploring as an industry to try to help slow the water that comes off of any plastic covered areas. There's also, of course, you know, sediment retention ponds, any sort of basins that we can put on the corners of fields to try to capture as much rainfall as that we can. You know, in situations like last year, there's a lot of rainfall, so then you get into just the logistic of space and size and how do you manage that. But those are some strategies that our growers are implementing.
Okay. Michael?
I was just going to mention that, you know, years ago, you saw a lot of those beds going up and down the slope. Now, it's rare. They're mostly going across the slope, but that helps a lot with retention of stormwater.
Totally. So I'm wondering about data gaps and what limitations of new technologies or technologies that you've been using that there are data gaps that need to be resolved. There are clinks in the system that you still need to work through. What data gaps are you seeing?
I'll just throw out that, you know, there's a lot of new sensors and technologies out there, and a lot of them have to work on wireless communication. And so I wouldn't say it's a data gap, but there's this need for sort of high-speed wireless communication on the ranch now, you know, and then standards for this communication. So if I buy a sensor from one manufacturer, I can interface it with another product, or maybe some software I'm using or another type of sensor, but we need those communication standards if we're going to try to, you know, go high tech.
Yeah, I just had a couple things. I think IoT might take care of some of that. We hear some conversations with some of the telecom providers that in the next, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, we may have SIM cards that don't need a gate to get up to the tower, directly to the tower, and they're even talking things like 10 cents a month. So, you know, that's pretty cheap data. So, because it's not streaming video, right? It's just little data bursts. But I think more important out there, what we're seeing is there's a lot of new startup companies and technologies and stuff, and a lot of them are running on VC, you know, venture capital, and so growers are reluctant to light up with them because they might be gone tomorrow, and so they're looking for some sustainability. And the other problem is that they all have their own little app for their phone and stuff, and no grower wants to have 12 apps on their phone to, you know, interrogate what's going on the farm. So I think a standardized platform, bring the stuff in, try to get away from these graphs and stuff, and just have actionable items coming to the growers so they know what to do. Have the information appropriate for the person in the field. So if it's a field irrigator, they have a certain level of information. If it's a farm manager, maybe somebody else. If it's the water manager, maybe a different level of information to make decisions. But I think it's really about taking this giant pile of data that we've got coming in and trying to make it and have the analytics on it so it comes out just, you know, how long do I irrigate today? Let me just answer that, right? It's 8 hours? Okay, good. That's all I need to know. I don't need to, you know, interpret 12 graphs and try to figure out what's going on. And I think we can get there as we get more trust in the technology, and it sounds like your ranch is getting there. And I think as it gets better and more reliable and we get a feel, you know, it's really the challenge, and we see this out there way too much. We have the practice and then we have the data. And I can't tell you how many times I hear about growers saying, you know, the soil moisture sensor's not working. I irrigated and there's no water. It's saying there's no water. Well, you dig out there and there's no water, right? It's either a plugged emitter or some other things going on, and they just don't trust the data, even if the data's right. And most of the time, the data is right, and the practice isn't really doing as well as it should. So we need to close that gap.
I'll just mention a few. As a vegetable grower, we're a little bit jealous of Kurt and the vineyards because they have a permanent crop. It's in the ground year-round. And for vegetables, they can turn really fast, 30 to 40-day crops. So you really don't have time to monitor and see a trend and then take it out. So you've got to focus only on those longer-day crops. Does every technology cover every single crop we grow in spring, summer, and fall? Every single soil type that we have, which is a variety from the sandiest of sand by the river all the way to heavy clays. And I would say some aspects of it too, just to ground truth this, let's say you have soil moisture monitoring, but you only have so many irrigators. They like to work during the day. There's a labor shortage, so they can't work at night. So even though you might want to, in theory, scientifically want to irrigate each field for just an hour, maybe a quarter inch of water for that field that day, and then do the same thing the next day and the same thing the next day, you just don't have that many staff on hand at this point to turn all the valves and rotate your water. So that's kind of a practical issue is that we're running up against is we have so many fields and just, a couple wells to apply to those fields. So it's not as ideal as you would like it to be.
I think, Michael, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's about 45 soil types in Monterey County. That's the number I've been given. And some fields will have, 5 different soil types within a field. I mean, it's complex, to your point.
I had one quick thing to add. And so all growers that I know of are tracking their water use and reporting it to either the Monterey, the Water Resources Agency in Monterey or the water quality regulators. And they're tracking water use, through water meters, and as a person who then collects that data, because again Driscoll's asks for it again, there's still a data gap around, not necessarily a data gap, but maybe just an opportunity for streamlining water use data, because there are so many situations where there are multiple wells, multiple users, and multiple crops, and so you end up with a stack of irrigator records, documenting each time they turn that pump on. But kind of back to Michael's point about how we can better utilize data and communications within the field to try to better track when water is literally going to 16 different places in one day. There's an opportunity to get more efficient with that data collection.
So we have time for one more question. I wish we could ask all of them, but I'm going to end it, especially because we have students here with us today in video and in person. Each of you is up here because you're a leader. You've all led and you've all influenced others in their quest to manage their water in a different way. So what advice do you have for the students out in the audience today as they consider a career in agriculture and water management? And if everyone would like to answer, I'd love that. So, whoever wants to start.
I'll just say I hope they consider irrigation and water management going forward, because my question to growers is, okay, us in research, we invent the perfect tool for you to tell you when to irrigate. Now what are you going to do? Because just as Jocelyn pointed out, many growers don't have the staff. They have people to turn on and off water, but they don't have somebody who really understands what the plant has experienced from a water perspective. And we need more people like that getting into farming.
My advice to young students would be that farmers are getting older, so there are job opportunities. Learning the technologies that are out there that you're passionate about, or if you're not passionate about technology, maybe you're passionate about agronomy or other aspects, just do what you're passionate about. And I would say try to talk to the people that you might want to work with. As a student, I think people might answer more emails or phone calls if you say, hey, I'm a local student at CSUMB or Hartnell. Can I talk to you about your job? Could I interview you? 10 minutes on the phone, or maybe they'll even meet you for lunch, or you could buy them coffee. So I would just try to connect with the people that you want to learn from.
And building on that, take advantage of any opportunity for internships, boots on the ground experience. Basically, I just took the approach of saying yes to any opportunity that came in front of me, really, somewhat related to my interests, but you're gonna get something out of it, some sort of practical experience. And I'd say, put your phones down and listen and be present and just try to absorb, what a grower or farmer has to offer, because it's a lot, and they'll see all of the tools and fresh knowledge that you're bringing to the table.
And for those students who don't put their phones down, I really think the future of irrigation is going to be apps. So we've got an orchard manager at Fresno State. He's kind of a millennial, and my God, he's got apps on there and we got. And I really do him a great disservice because we put every technology that comes along out on that farm, but he's got cameras, he's got everything on there, and you know what? He loves doing that, and it really adds to his ability to do a good job and manage it, and it really creates an interest. So what I'm really saying is that it's not about a shovel and digging in the mud. There's a lot of the science gets brought up into apps and actions, and there's really an opportunity to be a good resource manager. So if you're looking to do something, I think that has a holistic good to society, and that managing water and energy and the inputs is a pretty good place to be. And I've spent 35 years there, and I got to tell you, it's been very satisfying.
I'll just say that Scheid Vineyards has a robust internship program. And I'm available to talk after this. And just to stack on over here, every discipline in college has an opportunity in agriculture. So if you're in accounting, finance, if you're in any of the sciences, GIS, biology, physiology, you name it, all of those disciplines, all of those interests, there is a place for you at Scheid Vineyards. Thank you.
Thank you to our panel. Thank you for being here. All right. Very good. Forrest, do we have something coming up in a little bit to follow this? I'll let you have the floor.
I think so. Oh, good.
Thank you again, Abby, for doing such a marvelous job chairing and facilitating. Thank you again to all of our panelists. That was excellent and insightful. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.